Hey everyone, welcome to another video. Today we're going to talk about issue number 1 of X-Force, written by Jeffrey Thorne, but before we dive into the story, I want to ask you a favor. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and a comment to help the channel grow. Now this comic opens up in the middle of a gigantic battle between the X-Men and the Brood. And while this is going down, we see Nightcrawler, Storm, Shadowcat, Rogue, Colossus, Cyclops, and Wolverine just going to work. So as the battle was going down, we get a narrator telling her story, a story that starts off with 1 picosecond after she dies, she thought, because, of course, she is always thinking. And she remembers the first time they met. At that time she wasn't Sage then because she was still undercover at the Hellfire Club, working for Charles. Now usually, she can instantly size up any new player, for she creates predictive models of everyone she meets. And in those models, she thinks about how they think, their motivations, and even how they move. Now this was good for almost everyone, with the exception of one person, and that is Forge. And at that moment, we see Forge sitting on a couch eating a bag of chips as he abruptly pauses his virtual reality simulation. Because this whole battle that was playing out before him was just a recreation of an old event. So after Mahis interrupted his simulation, the robot went on to say you asked to be alerted when the components were complete. Now this caught Forge's attention because said component was supposed to take a full day to be done. Because according to Mahis, Forge has been sitting in the same space running his simulation for 36 hours straight. So as Forge was forced to come to terms with reality, he proceeded to get up and follow Mahis out of the chamber while receiving additional data. Because Mahis went on to say that the project is titled after Dr. Henry McCoy, aka Beast, whose work inspired this course of inquiry. Now with that out there, Mahé went on to display a projection of Beast talking, and the hologram said, it just comes down to him wanting to be normal, for Beast wanted a normal body, normal clothes, and most importantly a normal life. But nature gave Beast a mutated body, but it also gave him a mind. So with a great mind at Beast's disposal, the hologram of him went on to ask should it not use its mind to effect the changes it wants and needs. Because science is about understanding and taming nature and not bowing slavishly to its whims. Because through science they can tame the beast within. Now with that out there, Forge orders Mahé to deactivate the hologram as he goes on to adjust his mechanical leg. Because according to Forge, McCoy tried to run away from his mutation and stumbled into a power-up. But unlike McCoy, Forge didn't stumble because his mutation is reactive and passive, and with that power, Forge can see mechanical solutions to physical problems and build them. So with everything in place, Forge ordered Mahé to monitor and record his alpha test. So with the order given, Forge took his hand and started his test to make himself an Omega-level mutant. So once it is activated, Forge's eyes start to glow, and on the next page we see Forge consumed by power, and during his experiment, Forge says, Hard Home, Florida. The well of all things. The forest of torment, Sriracha. So as Forge continued to undergo his experiment, we pick back up with Sage's narration as she said Forge was a jumble, for he had too many variables and some were in conflict, and some oppositional. Overall there were just too many holes in his data flow. So at one point, Sage just asked him, how do you work? To which, Forge replied by saying at the end of the day, there's nothing wrong in the world that I can't fix by putting my hands on it. Now with that out there, Forge's experiment came to an end and he collapsed on the floor. And the first thing he said was, Tessa, because nothing works without Tessa. Now following that on the next page, we transition over to Geneva, Switzerland, and when we get there, we see Forge talking with one of the staff members. And during their conversation, the staff member said when the patient, Tessa, arrived she had no identification card, no travel documents, and she was clearly in mental distress from some trauma. Now with that out of the way, Forge walked into Sage's room and told her he was in the same spot she was in just a week ago. Because during the fall of X, everything was broken, they believed their friends were dead, scattered, and on the run, so with all things considered, the world was basically over and they believed it was all their fault. But see, no one saw it coming, no one could have seen it coming, even Sage. Because people like Forge and Sage don't just fold up shop and run, and they definitely don't hide. Because people like them choose to fight. So to fix that, Forge decided to create an object, to create a sphere. Now this caught Sage's attention, and after further inspection, Sage noticed it was breaking because of all these fissures, fractures in the sphere as if the world was breaking. Now with that explained, we fast forward 10 days later with the X-Jet flying to Japan. Now while the X-Jet continued to fly, we pick back up with the narrator containing where Sage left off. And Sage states that she thought Forge was full of himself, even with people like Shaw and Frost strutting around. So with that said, Sage asks Forge why don't they contact the Japanese authorities. Now the reason why they don't is because half of the world's government has declared mutants as automatic terrorists, and the other half is scared of them. So with that out of the way, both Sage and Forge jumped out of the X-Jet and descended to the Earth below. And as Forge and Sage fell, Sage retasked the military satellites to give them telemetry on the ground below. Now the way they landed was by using laced boots with artificial vibranium. Now with that explained, once the two were on the ground, Sage tells Forge that the satellite imaging showed the city is completely cold, with no heat plumes, and no comm traffic. And as for the population, there is supposed to be 30,000, but for some reason there are none. Now with that out there, Forge requested a psychic assist for help. And out of the sky flew Betsy and Rachel. Now on the next page, we jump back 4 days ago with Sage and Forge meeting with Rachel and Betsy. And during this meeting, Forge was trying to convince them to join his new X-Force. Now at first they wasn't going to join, but Rachel convinced her partner to come with them. Now on a side note, Betsy gave in but under the stipulation that Deadpool stay off the team. Now with that out of the way, we jump back to current day with Rachel and Betsy talking about how Forge refuses to use psychic communication and wears a Cyblocker headband instead and prefers to use traditional comms instead. Now on a side note, I think this will play a big role later on in the story. But anyway, getting back to the story, Betsy and Rachel pick up on a concentration of human psionic energy up ahead. So while they flew, they came upon a dead end, and once they got there, they landed and traveled by foot. And once they were on the ground, Rachel, Betsy, and Forge took the lead, as Sage sat back and overlooked the area, and scanned for any additional reading. So as they marched down the road, they noticed that the area was covered with a blue glue, and no matter how much they looked, they couldn't quite figure out what it was. And asked for the citizens, they were still nowhere to be found. So as Sage reached for the door, Rachel called for her to look out, as an electrical burst erupted from the room, throwing everyone back. So as the electricity flooded the area, the mysterious mutant started to wreck shop, and right before the mutant was able to clash with Betsy, Rachel called for the fighting to stop. And with the help of Rachel's power, the mutant was stopped in her tracks, and while she had her, Rachel broke one of Forge's rules and gave everyone a psychic briefing on who the mutant was that was attacking. The info dump said the mutant name was Nori and her code name was Surge with the power of electrical absorption and hyperspeed redirection, and she was also a former student of the X Institute. With that out there, Surge was excited to see familiar faces and gave Forge a hug as the rest of the survivors exited the shelter. And almost immediately, the survivors tried their best to get the members of X-Force out of the opening before whatever was attacking them showed back up. Because after Krakoa fell, Surge went back to Japan to visit a cousin when the creatures attacked. Now the creatures was made out of some kind of sludge and attacked everything that was alive. So when Surge heard the noise outside, she thought the creatures were back, so she tried to protect her people. Now once she was done telling her story, one of those sludge creatures appeared and took hold of one of the survivors, and before they could react, a horde of them manifested and went on the attack. So with the attack going down, Surge told everyone that they have to avoid touching them and to use guns if possible. Now with them being outnumbered, Forge called for Tank and Wade for reinforcement, just as they came in hot. And Betsy was not happy about it at all. So as Deadpool and Tank crashed on the scene, they immediately went to work on the sludge creatures. And during their battle, Deadpool makes a comment about how he being there is a tie-in for the Deadpool and Wolverine movie that just came out. Following that, we see the moment Forge first contacted Deadpool. Because during their conversation, Deadpool was excited to join the team, but that is when Forge corrected him and said they were just hiring him for a job. Now following that, we jump back to the current day with Deadpool was swarmed with the blue sludge creature, and almost instantly, the creatures turned into ash. And on the next page, we see Deadpool running through the creatures, just clearing the way. So as things started to get intense, Rachel tried her best to hold off the creatures by using her ability, and once she realized it was getting out of hand, Rachel called for a boost from Betsy. And once she received it, Rachel's power increased and created a shield. So with a temporary pause in the combat, Sage regained access to the satellite, and once she got it, she completed her analysis of the creature's attack pattern. And what she found was that they didn't have one. Because they are just in their way, because the creatures are all migrating east. Now with that bit of data, on the next page, we see a gigantic sludge creature turning a corner and looking down on them. And almost instantly, Betsy collapsed on the floor in a burst of pain, because whatever the sludge is, it is using telepathic attacks on Betsy. Now this pissed her off, so in a counterattack, Rachel let out an attack of her own that blew a huge hole in its body. And just as it opened, it closed as if nothing happened. So with all attacks turning up cold, Sage drops a bit of additional clues about the origins of the creature. Because Sage discovered that the research group that created it was a subsidiary group of Essex Holding Corporation, Sinister Company. And the company in question has been splicing mutant genes with alien biomes to produce hybrid organic weapons. And as for this creature, it obviously broke containment. And once it got out, the creature started to eat animal matter to rapidly add to its mass, so if it continued to go unchecked, then this creature could consume until there was nothing left. Now with the Analog's world killer out of the way, Forge ordered everyone to fall back as he ordered Tank to execute Maneuver L. So with no hesitation, Tank grabbed Deadpool, picked him up, and threw him directly at the sludge. And as soon as Deadpool made contact, the orb showed that the fracture within it was corrected, so it was now time for them to go. So with inhuman strength, Tank picked Forge up and jumped away. And as he was leaving, Forge told Wade that he was the poison pill for the monster because his cancer cells were exactly what they needed to end the fracture. Because like they said earlier, the creature eats biomass to grow, and Deadpool is like a buffet of empty calories. Because his cancer cells constantly regenerate over and over again until the creature eventually starves to death. And by the rate in which it is eating, they assumed it would take 3 days until it is dead. So with the mission complete, Forge tells the team the next fracture is located in Wakanda in the Forest of Torment. With that said, this issue comes to an end. Now down in the comment section below, let me know your thoughts about this issue and what predictions you could have moving forward. So with that established, I hope you enjoyed this video, and please don't forget to leave a like and a comment if you want to see more videos like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.